Anya, a black woman, was told private jets aren't for her. She revealed she owned it and fired the pilot. Some stories don't just inspire. They shake the foundation of what we think is fair, just, and right. Today, you'll hear about a moment that started with ignorance, but ended in a lesson no one will forget. A woman, strong and determined, walked into a private terminal, only to face prejudice and assumptions that would challenge anyone's resolve. But what she did next wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about creating change. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. If you love inspiring stories of resilience and justice, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more incredible tales. Your support helps us share these impactful stories with even more people. Now let's get into it. The private terminal was alive with quiet murmurs and the shuffle of designer luggage. Polished marble floors reflected the opulence of travelers breezing through security, their tailored suits and couture outfits painting a picture of privilege. Yet, among them, one figure stood apart, not by design, but by the gravity she carried. Anya's heels clicked against the pristine floor with a deliberate rhythm, announcing her presence before her face could. She was tall, statuesque, and carried herself with an effortless elegance. A tailored navy blue pantsuit hugged her frame, paired with a silk blouse that caught the morning light. Her hair, a crown of soft, natural curls, framed her high cheekbones and sharp, almond-shaped eyes. But it wasn't just her appearance that turned heads, it was her aura. Anya's gaze was focused yet calm, like a pilot's just before takeoff. She clutched a leather briefcase, not a handbag, and her every step seemed to echo a quiet defiance. I belong here, whether you see it or not. She had navigated rooms like this her whole life, spaces where her presence was questioned, her achievements doubted. As the CEO of a global tech firm she'd built from scratch, Anya had proven her worth 10 times over, yet she knew better than to expect that recognition would come freely. She paused at the concierge desk, her deep brown eyes scanning the flight schedule. The attendant, a young man in a crisp uniform, did a double-take as she approached. "Good morning," Anya greeted, her voice smooth and steady. "I'm here for the Kestrel jet, flight number 8641. The attendant blinked, then composed himself. "Oh, of course, ma'am. One moment." His fingers flew across the keyboard, but Anya could already sense his doubt. Her intuition was rarely wrong. Years of microaggressions had trained her to notice the subtle signs, the fleeting hesitation in someone's eyes, the slight tightening of their jaw. The man's expression softened as he found her name in the manifest. "You're all set. The plane will be ready for boarding shortly." Anya nodded and turned toward the lounge, but not before catching the curious glances of 2 passengers nearby. She met their stares with a faint smile, not warm, but not confrontational either. They'll always look, she thought. It's what you do next that matters. The lounge was a symphony of understated luxury, plush leather chairs arranged in tasteful clusters, servers offering glasses of champagne on silver trays. Anya selected a corner seat by the window, where she could see her jet being prepped on the tarmac. She leaned back and exhaled slowly, letting the calm wash over her. Moments like this, just before departure, always felt like a pause in time. She thrived in the air, in the space between destinations. It was where she felt most free. Reaching into her briefcase, she pulled out a slim notebook and began reviewing the day's agenda. Meetings with investors, a call with her product team, dinner with a close friend. It was a full schedule, but Anya thrived on the demands of her success. Still, her mind drifted as she scribbled notes. Her path to this terminal, this life, had been anything but linear. Born to a single mother in a small southern town, Anya had learned early that the world wasn't fair, but her mother had also taught her something more powerful: you can rise above it. Anya had taken those words to heart, carving her way through scholarships, internships, and an Ivy League education. She had faced racism in boardrooms, condescension in meetings, and outright hostility in negotiations. Yet, here she was, unshakable, unstoppable, and unapologetic. Her reverie was interrupted by the sound of approaching heels. A flight attendant, petite and blonde, stopped in front of Anya with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Excuse me, ma'am," the woman said, her tone clipped. "Can I help you?" Anya looked up slowly, her pen still poised over her notebook. "No, thank you. I'm waiting for my flight." The woman's eyes flicked to Anya's briefcase, then her outfit, then back to her face. Something in her expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. "Well," the attendant said, her voice dropping into a patronizing register. "This lounge is for passengers flying privately. Are you sure you're in the right place?" Anya's pen hovered in midair. She let the question hang for a moment, studying the woman's face. "Yes," she said, her voice even but firm. "I'm certain." The attendant hesitated, clearly not expecting Anya to stand her ground so effortlessly. "I see," she said, her smile faltering. "I'll just check on your flight." Anya watched her retreat, a familiar pang of frustration settling in her chest. But she didn't let it linger. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Don't let them rattle you, baby. Stay your course." And she would, because Anya Stone wasn't just a passenger. She was the owner of the jet waiting on the tarmac. And soon, the people doubting her would learn exactly who they were dealing with. Anya returned her focus to her notebook, but the interruption had left her unsettled. The flight attendant's tone, the thinly veiled doubt, and the presumptive dismissal, all of it was far too familiar. She could feel the simmering heat of indignation rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. She had learned long ago that anger, no matter how justified, was often used as a weapon against her. She straightened her posture and began writing again, her pen gliding across the page with deliberate intent. "Stay focused, Anya. Don't give them the satisfaction." But the reprieve was short-lived. The sound of those same heels clicking against the polished floor returned, accompanied by another voice, deeper, authoritative. Anya glanced up to see the flight attendant, now flanked by a man in a pilot's uniform. His shoulders were broad, his stance rigid, and his expression betrayed an air of irritation. The flight attendant, Lisa, as her name tag revealed, gestured toward Anya with a flick of her hand, as though she were pointing out a misplaced item in the lounge. "That's her," Lisa said in a low voice, loud enough for Anya to hear, but soft enough to feign discretion. The pilot, Kent, approached Anya with measured steps, his eyes scanning her with a mixture of suspicion and impatience. "Ma'am," he began, his tone brisk, "I've been informed there's been some confusion regarding your flight. This lounge is reserved for private jet passengers only." Anya closed her notebook slowly, placing her pen neatly on top. Her calm gaze met Kent's with unwavering steadiness. "There's no confusion," she replied evenly. "I am a private jet passenger." Lisa interjected with a tight smile that barely masked her irritation. "Yes, well, it's just that we've never seen you here before. Are you sure you're not with one of the commercial flights? It happens sometimes." Anya raised an eyebrow, her patience wearing thin. "I'm sure. My jet is Kestrel 8641, scheduled to depart shortly." Kent crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. "That's a high-value flight. Do you have any documentation to prove you're supposed to be on it?" Anya inhaled deeply, reining in her growing frustration. "My name is on the manifest. Your concierge already confirmed it." Lisa's smile wavered, but she pressed on. "It's just unusual, you see. Most of our private passengers are executives or, well, regulars at this terminal. It's standard procedure to verify identities when there's uncertainty." "Uncertainty," Anya repeated, her voice laced with incredulity. "Let me make this clear. There's no uncertainty on my part. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. The question is, why are you assuming otherwise?" Kent shifted uncomfortably, but didn't back down. "It's not an assumption, ma'am. We're just following protocol. If you could provide—" Anya cut him off, her voice firm but controlled. "I've already provided what's required. The manifest has my name. I don't owe you anything beyond that." Her words hung in the air, a quiet challenge that neither Lisa nor Kent seemed prepared to meet. But Lisa wasn't ready to let it go. Her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her blazer as she leaned forward slightly, her tone taking on a patronizing edge. "We're not trying to be difficult, ma'am. It's just that private jets are typically reserved for a certain clientele. You understand, right? There's a certain standard we have to uphold." Anya's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "A standard?" she repeated slowly. "And I suppose you've decided I don't meet it?" Lisa's face reddened slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Not at all. We just want to ensure that everything is in order. It's for everyone's safety and comfort." Anya's gaze didn't waver. She could feel the weight of the other passengers' eyes on her, the quiet judgment that hung in the air like a heavy fog. But she wasn't going to let Lisa or Kent have the last word. "Here's what's in order," Anya said, her voice calm but unyielding. "I booked this jet. My name is on your manifest. and I don't appreciate being treated like I don't belong here. So, unless there's a legitimate issue, I suggest you stop wasting my time." Kent's jaw tightened, and he glanced at Lisa, who seemed momentarily at a loss. The lounge had grown uncomfortably quiet, the tension palpable. Lisa cleared her throat and tried one last time. "Perhaps there's been a mix-up with the booking. If you'd like, we can double-check with the owner of the jet." Anya's eyes darkened, her patience finally snapping. "The owner," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous low. Lisa hesitated, sensing she had misstepped. "I am the owner," Anya continued, enunciating each word with measured precision. "This jet belongs to me. And if you had bothered to check instead of making baseless assumptions, you would have known that." The words landed like a thunderclap, silencing even the faint whispers among the other passengers. Kent's face flushed, and he stammered, "2C. I wasn't aware." "You weren't aware because you didn't bother to find out," Anya interjected. "Instead, you assumed that someone like me couldn't possibly own a jet like that." Lisa opened her mouth to respond, but quickly shut it again, her face pale. Anya stood, her movements deliberate and commanding. She towered over the pair, her presence filling the space with a quiet authority that demanded respect. "Let me make this simple," she said, her voice steady. "I will not tolerate being disrespected. If this is how you treat your passengers, then you're clearly in the wrong line of work. And I assure you, this isn't over." The silence in the lounge was thick, heavy with unspoken judgment. Anya could feel every pair of eyes on her, like needles pricking at her composure. But she had faced worse, much worse. Lisa, clearly not one to back down easily, exchanged a quick glance with Kent. Emboldened by his presence, she stepped closer, her tone dripping with faux professionalism. "Ma'am," Lisa began, her smile tight and forced. "Perhaps there's been some misunderstanding. These private jets are typically reserved for high-net-worth individuals and executives. It's possible the booking was made under someone else's name, perhaps your employer or a sponsor." Anya's jaw tightened at the insinuation. She met Lisa's gaze, her eyes like polished steel. "The only name on that booking is mine," she replied coldly. "I don't need an employer or a sponsor, and I certainly don't need to explain myself to you." Kent stepped forward, his tone taking on an air of authority. "Ma'am, I think we're all trying to resolve this calmly. If you could just provide some form of additional identification." Anya cut him off, her voice sharp. "I've already given you more than enough. My name is on the manifest. That should be sufficient. Or is this additional protocol reserved only for certain passengers?" Her words landed with precision, the implied accusation slicing through the air. Kent hesitated, but Lisa, unwilling to relent, pressed on. "With all due respect, ma'am," Lisa said, her voice strained. "We've had incidents before, people who misunderstand the process. It's not personal." Anya let out a short, humorless laugh. "Not personal," she repeated. "You've questioned me since the moment I walked through that door. You assumed I didn't belong here before I even said a word. If that's not personal, I'd hate to see what is." Lisa's cheeks flushed, but she didn't back down. Instead, she gestured toward the concierge desk. "Perhaps we should check with security," she suggested. "They can verify everything more thoroughly." Kent nodded, his confidence returning. "Yes, that might be the best course of action. We wouldn't want to inconvenience any of our other passengers." Anya's patience, already wearing thin, snapped. She stood, her posture commanding, and addressed them both. "You've already inconvenienced me," she said, her voice steady but laced with anger. "And let me remind you, I am the owner of the jet you're so eager to question me about. If anyone should be calling security, it's me." Lisa faltered, but Kent's skepticism hardened. "Owner," he echoed, his tone incredulous. "With all due respect, ma'am, owning a private jet isn't exactly common." Anya arched an eyebrow, her gaze piercing. "And what about me makes you think I wouldn't own one?" Kent hesitated, struggling to find an answer that wouldn't betray his prejudice. Lisa, meanwhile, looked increasingly uncomfortable but clung to her composure. "It's just that unusual," Linda stammered. "We weren't aware of any new ownership for this flight." Anya stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. "Unusual for who? You? Or is it just unusual for someone like me to walk into this terminal and expect the same respect you'd give anyone else?" Before they could respond, the concierge, clearly overhearing the escalating argument, approached cautiously. He held a tablet in his hands, his expression a mixture of apprehension and regret. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Anya directly. Miss Stone, I've just reconfirmed the manifest, and your name is indeed listed as the owner of Kestrel 8641. Lisa and Kent froze, their faces pale. The weight of the revelation hung in the air, suffocating them both. Anya turned to the concierge, her voice cool. Thank you for doing your job. Clearly, it's more than some people here are capable of. The concierge nodded, glancing nervously at Lisa and Kent before retreating. Lisa, now visibly flustered, tried to recover. Miss Stone, Tu didn't mean to imply. Anya raised a hand, silencing her. You didn't mean to imply, but you did. Repeatedly. And let me be very clear. Your assumptions and your arrogance are unacceptable. Kent, his authority shattered, attempted to salvage the situation. Miss Stone, I hope you understand. We were just following what? Anya interrupted, her voice like a whip. Your biases? Your stereotypes? Because it certainly wasn't protocol. Protocol was confirming my name on the manifest, which you failed to do until I forced the issue. Lisa opened her mouth to speak, but Anya wasn't finished. And let me ask you this. If I didn't look the way I do, would you have questioned me at all? Neither of them answered. They didn't need to. The answer was written all over their faces. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of a nearby espresso machine. Anya took a step back, her voice softening but losing none of its edge. This isn't just about me, she said. It's about every person who's walked into this terminal and been made to feel like they don't belong. And I won't stand for it. Not here and not anywhere. She turned on her heel, her movements sharp and deliberate, and strode toward the exit. But before leaving, she paused, glancing over her shoulder. And don't worry, she added, her voice dripping with finality. I'll be speaking with your CEO. I suspect they'll have some thoughts about how you've represented their company today. As Anya walked away, Lisa and Kent were left standing in the center of the lounge, their confidence shattered and their futures uncertain. The storm had passed, but the damage was done. And Anya Stone had made it clear she wasn't someone to be underestimated. The sharp sound of Anya's heels clicking against the polished floor resonated through the lounge, echoing her resolve. The air was heavy, charged with the aftermath of her confrontation. She approached the large, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac, her sharp gaze locked on the sleek Kestrel 8641, her jet. Its metallic sheen glistened under the sunlight, a testament to her hard-earned success. Anya inhaled deeply, letting the view ground her. But even the sight of her own accomplishment couldn't fully shake the simmering anger that pulsed through her veins. She wasn't done. Behind her, Lisa and Kent lingered near the concierge desk, their whispered conversation an attempt to regroup. Anya could feel their stares, could hear the occasional word escape their hushed tone. Owner, impossible. Should we call someone? Anya turned slowly, her deliberate movements silencing them. She walked back toward the lounge, her presence as commanding as ever. Lisa flinched slightly, but Kent squared his shoulders, attempting to recover his lost authority. Miss Stone, Kent began, his tone more measured now, but still tinged with defensiveness. I believe we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. If you'd allow us to clarify. Anya raised a hand, her expression unreadable, but her gaze piercing. Clarify, she repeated. You had every opportunity to clarify when I told you my name was on the manifest. Instead, you chose to escalate the situation. You chose to question me. And now you want to clarify? Go ahead. I'm listening. Kent hesitated, his confidence faltering under Anya's scrutiny. Lisa, unable to bear the silence, stepped in. Miss Stone, we're deeply sorry if there was any misunderstanding, Lisa said, her voice strained. It's just that we're trained to ensure the safety and comfort of our passengers. You have to understand what I understand, Anya interjected, her tone calm but cutting, is that you assumed I didn't belong here, that I wasn't capable of owning a jet like that. Don't dress it up as safety or protocol. This was about your biases, plain and simple. Lisa's cheeks flushed, and she stammered. That's not what we meant at all. It's just that unusual, that's all. We didn't mean to offend you. Anya tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. Unusual, she repeated, her voice soft but laced with steel. Tell me, Lisa, would it have been just as unusual if someone who looked more like you walked in here today? The room fell silent again, the weight of Anya's question hanging heavily in the air. Lisa's lips parted as if to respond, but no words came out. Kent shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the ground. Anya stepped closer, her presence towering over them despite her calm demeanor. This isn't the first time I've walked into a room like this and been met with doubt, Anya said, her voice steady. And it won't be the last. But let me tell you something. I didn't work this hard, sacrifice this much, and achieve what I've achieved to be questioned by people who can't see beyond their own narrow assumptions. She let her words sink in, her gaze shifting between Lisa and Kent. At that moment, the concierge returned, his face pale but determined. He cleared his throat, clutching the tablet tightly. "Miss Stone," he said nervously, "I've taken the liberty of alerting the terminal manager. They'll be here shortly to address this situation." Anya nodded curtly. "Good. Perhaps they'll be more equipped to handle this professionally." Lisa's face paled further. "Miss Stone, that's not necessary. We can resolve this right here, can't we?" Anya turned to her, her gaze icy. "Resolve this, Lisa? If it were up to you, I'd still be explaining why I'm in this lounge. No, this needs to go higher." Minutes later, the terminal manager, a middle-aged man in a sharp suit, arrived. His face was a picture of concern as he approached Anya directly, his hands clasped in front of him. "Miss Stone, I deeply apologize for any inconvenience caused," he began, his voice sincere. "I've been briefed on the situation, and I assure you, this is not how we conduct business here." Anya raised an eyebrow, her expression skeptical. "Not how you conduct business. Then why did it happen?" The manager glanced at Lisa and Kent, who both looked visibly uncomfortable. "There's no excuse, ma'am," he said firmly. "I will personally ensure that those responsible are held accountable." Anya studied him for a moment, her gaze sharp. "Good. Because if this is how your staff treats me, I can only imagine how they treat others who don't have the means to fight back." The manager nodded, his face somber. "You're absolutely right, Miss Stone. I'll ensure this doesn't happen again." Anya's gaze didn't waver. "See that you do? And let me make one thing clear. I'm not just a passenger. I'm an owner. This isn't just about my comfort. It's about the standards I expect from anyone representing my company. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," the manager replied, his tone resolute. "I understand completely." As the manager escorted Lisa and Kent away, Anya returned to her seat, the tension in her shoulders finally easing. She glanced out at her jet once more, its sleek lines a reminder of her triumphs. But this victory wasn't just hers. It was a small step toward something bigger, toward a world where people like her wouldn't have to fight so hard just to be seen. Alice leaned back in her chair, her composure unshaken. She had faced the storm, and she had won. But as the engines of Kestrel 8641 roared to life, she knew this was just one battle in a much larger war. The engines of the Kestrel 8641 hummed softly on the tarmac, their steady rhythm a stark contrast to the storm of emotions brewing around Anya. She stood at the base of the jet stairs, her sharp silhouette framed against the glint of the polished aircraft. The moment was hers, but she wasn't ready to board yet. There were still questions left unanswered, wrongs that demanded resolution. Behind her, the sound of hurried footsteps broke the stillness. The terminal doors hissed open, and the manager appeared, his face a mix of concern and forced composure. Flanking him were Lisa and Kent, their once confident demeanors reduced to nervous glances and tense postures. The trio approached cautiously, as though walking toward a storm they weren't prepared to weather. Anya turned to face them, her expression calm but unreadable. Her silence, deliberate and weighted, seemed to pull the air from the room. It wasn't just a pause, it was a statement. "You've underestimated me for the last time." The manager was the first to speak, his voice carefully measured. "Miss Stone," he began, clasping his hands together, "I want to personally apologize for the treatment you experienced today. This is not the standard we hold ourselves to, and I deeply regret any offense caused." Anya tilted her head slightly, her gaze cool. "Regret is easy to express after the fact," she said, her tone calm but razor-sharp. "What I want to understand is how this happened in the first place." The manager hesitated, glancing at Lisa and Kent as though hoping they might step in. Neither did. Instead, Lisa shifted nervously, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her blazer. Kent avoided Anya's gaze entirely, staring at a point just over her shoulder. "I'd like to hear it directly from them," Anya continued, her eyes locking onto Lisa's. "You had no hesitation questioning me, Lisa, No hesitation making assumptions about who I am and what I'm capable of. So tell me, what exactly made you so confident I didn't belong? Lisa's face reddened, and she opened her mouth to respond, but the words faltered. Tu didn't mean to imply you didn't belong, Miss Stone, she stammered. It's just that we don't usually see passengers like you. Anya raised an eyebrow, her gaze icy. Passengers like me, she repeated. And what exactly does that mean, Lisa? Lisa's voice trembled. Tu didn't mean anything by it, I swear. It's just that unusual for someone to arrive alone, without an assistant or— Anya cut her off with a sharp laugh, though there was no humor in it. So, because I didn't fit your idea of what a private jet owner looks like, you decided I couldn't possibly be one? That's your excuse. Kent, emboldened by Lisa's faltering, stepped forward, his tone defensive. Miss Stone, we're trained to be vigilant. It's part of our job to ensure that only authorized individuals have access to private flights. When someone doesn't fit the typical profile, Anya interrupted, her voice dropping into a dangerous calm. What you mean, Kent, is when someone doesn't look like the wealthy, white executive you're used to catering to. Kent stiffened, his face flushing. That's not what I meant. Then explain it to me, Anya challenged, her eyes narrowing. Because from where I'm standing, that's exactly what you meant. You didn't see a passenger or an owner. You saw someone you assumed didn't belong. And instead of verifying the facts, you treated me like an intruder. The weight of Anya's words hung in the air, suffocating them. Lisa's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling as she tried to speak again. Miss Stone, I'm so sorry. Tu didn't think that I mean. I wasn't trying to be— Anya held up a hand, silencing her. Don't apologize for what you think I want to hear, Lisa. Apologize because you've recognized the harm your actions caused. Do you understand the weight of what you did today? Or are you just trying to save face? Lisa's tears spilled over, and she nodded weakly. I understand, Miss Stone. I really do. Tu'll do better. I promise. Anya's gaze softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. Promises are easy, Lisa. Change is hard. If you're truly committed to doing better, it's not enough to promise me. You need to reflect on every decision you make moving forward, every interaction, every assumption. Because if this is how you treat me, I can't imagine how many others you've dismissed without even realizing it. The manager cleared his throat nervously, stepping in to break the tension. Miss Stone, he said, his tone placating, I want to assure you that we take this matter very seriously. Both Lisa and Kent will be held accountable for their actions. In fact, we've already initiated a review of our staff training protocols to ensure this never happens again. Anya turned her gaze to him, her expression skeptical. Training protocols? She echoed. You think a few workshops are going to undo years of bias? This isn't about training. It's about accountability, about creating a culture where this kind of behavior isn't tolerated in the first place. The manager nodded quickly. Of course, Miss Stone. You're absolutely right. We'll ensure that meaningful steps are taken. Anya studied him for a moment, her sharp gaze unyielding. Then, she nodded slowly. Good. Because if I find out this is just lip service, you'll be hearing from me again. And next time, it won't be a conversation. The manager swallowed hard, his face pale. Understood, Miss Stone. Anya turned her attention back to Lisa and Kent, her gaze softening just slightly. As for you too, she said, her voice steady. Consider this a wake-up call. You're not just representing yourselves. You're representing your company, your team, and the people you interact with every day. If you can't approach that responsibility with the respect it deserves, you have no business being here. Lisa nodded tearfully, and Kent muttered a strained, Yes, ma'am. With that, Anya turned back toward the stairs leading to her jet. Each step she took was deliberate, her heels clicking against the metal with a confidence that seemed to reverberate through the tarmac. She paused at the entrance, her hand resting on the cool metal frame, and glanced back at the trio standing awkwardly below. This isn't just about me, she said, her voice calm but firm. It's about every person who's ever walked into a space like this and been made to feel like they didn't belong. That stops now. Do better. And with those final words, Anya stepped into her jet, the door closing behind her with a satisfying hiss. The engines roared to life, and as the aircraft began its ascent, Anya leaned back in her seat, her gaze steady and her resolve unshaken. She had faced the storm and emerged victorious. But her fight wasn't just for herself. It was for everyone who dared to defy expectations, and demand their rightful place in the sky. The jet door sealed shut with a quiet hiss, cocooning Anya in an oasis of calm. The noise of the terminal, the tension of the lounge, and the weight of Lisa and Kent's assumptions were left behind on the tarmac. Inside the Kestrel 8641, the world was hers, a carefully designed sanctuary of comfort and elegance. Yet, as the engines hummed softly beneath her, Anya couldn't fully relax. The encounter still clung to her, its sting fresh. She settled into the plush leather seat near the window, her hand brushing over the smooth stitching of the armrest. It was her design, down to the smallest detail. Everything in the jet was a reflection of her tastes, her hard work, and her triumphs. But at that moment, the luxury around her felt hollow, overshadowed by the events of the day. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts, and a flight attendant, one of her own staff, approached. Kara, a warm presence, greeted her. "Miss Stone, we're ready for takeoff. Would you like a drink before we depart?" Anya looked up at Kara, her expression softening. Unlike Lisa and Kent, Kara treated her with the respect she deserved, not because of her status, but because of who she was. It was a reminder that kindness and professionalism still existed in some corners of the world. "Just water, thank you," Anya said, her voice quieter than usual. Kara nodded and disappeared into the small galley. As Anya waited, she let her gaze wander to the window, where the terminal loomed in the distance. From here, Lisa and Kent were barely specks on the tarmac, but their actions still felt larger than life. The engines roared to life, and the jet began to taxi down the runway. The motion, steady and deliberate, matched Anya's own resolve. She closed her eyes, letting the vibrations of the aircraft lull her into a state of reflection. The confrontation with Lisa and Kent wasn't the first time Anya had faced such treatment. In her mind, she saw flashes of past experiences. A boardroom full of skeptical men when she first pitched her startup idea. A recruiter dismissing her Ivy League credentials as impressive for someone with your background. A restaurant server assuming her dining partner would pay because he was white. Each moment had chipped away at her, but it had also sharpened her resolve. She had learned to turn those moments of doubt into fuel, building herself into a force that no one could ignore. Yet, no matter how high she climbed, the weight of prejudice seemed to follow her. The jet lifted off the runway, the smooth ascent pressing her gently into her seat. Anya opened her eyes, watching as the ground fell away. The city, sprawling and chaotic, shrank into a patchwork of lights and shadows. Up here, she felt free, above the noise, above the judgments, above the doubts. Kara returned with a glass of water, placing it carefully on the small table beside Anya. "If there's anything else you need, just let me know," Kara said warmly. Anya nodded, offering a small smile. "Thank you, Kara." Actually, she hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Have you ever experienced what I went through today? Being judged before you've even had a chance to prove yourself?" Kara paused, her expression thoughtful. "I have, Miss Stone. Not to the same extent, perhaps, but yes. It's hard to escape. People see what they want to see." Anya nodded slowly, her gaze distant, and they rarely see the whole picture. The conversation lingered in Anya's mind long after Kara returned to her duties. It reminded her why she had fought so hard to get where she was, not just for herself, but for others like her, people who were dismissed, underestimated, and boxed in by society's narrow expectations. Anya reached for her briefcase, pulling out a slim folder containing her latest project, a mentorship program for women and minorities in the tech industry. The program was still in its early stages, but it was her way of giving back, of breaking the cycle of doubt and discrimination for the next generation. She flipped through the documents, her resolve hardening with each page. The events of the day had left a bitter taste, but they also reignited her purpose. She couldn't control the biases of others, but she could create opportunities for those who had been overlooked. The flight stretched on, the jet cutting through the clouds with effortless grace. Anya eventually set the folder aside, leaning back in her seat as exhaustion began to creep in. She closed her eyes, allowing her mind to drift. She thought about Lisa, about Kent, about all the Lisas and Kents she had encountered over the years. She wondered if today's events would truly change them, or if they would simply see her as an exception to their biases, a rare outlier who didn't fit their preconceived notions. But then, she thought of Kara, of the kindness and professionalism she had shown without hesitation. It was a reminder that change was possible, that respect could prevail, even in a world steeped in prejudice. As the jet began its descent, Anya opened her eyes, watching as the ground came back into view. She felt lighter somehow, as though shedding the weight of the day. The Kestrel 8641, her sanctuary in the skies, had done its job. It had reminded her of who she was, of what she stood for, and of the heights she was determined to reach, no matter who tried to hold her down. When the jet finally touched down, Anya stepped onto the tarmac with the same quiet confidence she had carried into the terminal that morning. The battle wasn't over, but for now, she was ready to face whatever came next. And this time, she would soar higher than ever before. The Kestrel 8641 glided to a stop on the private runway, its engines softly powering down. Anya stood near the cabin door, her hand resting on the frame, as she surveyed the bustling activity below. Ground crew scurried to and fro, preparing to welcome her, but her gaze was distant. Her mind was still tethered to the events of the day, each detail replaying itself like a film on loop. She descended the stairs slowly, her heels striking the metal steps with quiet precision. Every step was a reminder of her resolve, each echo a testament to the battle she had faced and won. By the time she reached the tarmac, her composure was unshakable. As Anya stepped into the waiting car, her driver, an older man named Ben, who had worked for her for years, greeted her with a warm smile. "Good evening, Miss Stone," he said, holding the door open for her. Anya returned the smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Evening, Ben. Thank you." Once inside, she pulled out her phone, intending to review her agenda for the week, but her screen lit up with a notification from her assistant, Emily. "Emily, I've received a call from the terminal manager. He wants to schedule a meeting with you tomorrow. Says it's urgent." Anya stared at the message for a moment, her fingers hovering over the screen. She wasn't surprised. After all, the manager's nervous demeanor earlier had practically screamed damage control. What did surprise her was the tone of urgency. "Anya, schedule it for 9 a.m. I want to see what he has to say." "Emily, done. Anything else I should know?" Anya paused before typing. "Anya, no, but keep an eye on the news. I want to know if today's events make it outside the terminal." The following morning, Anya arrived at the terminal's administrative offices promptly at 9 o'clock, dressed in a sharp black blazer and tailored pants. She radiated authority. The receptionist greeted her with a nervous smile and led her to a conference room, where the terminal manager was already waiting. The man stood as Anya entered, extending a hand. "Miss Stone, thank you for coming. I appreciate your time." Anya shook his hand briefly before taking a seat. "Let's not waste any more of it," she said, her tone calm but firm. "What's so urgent?" The manager sat across from her, folding his hands on the table. "First, let me express my deepest apologies once again for what happened yesterday. I've already initiated disciplinary actions against Lisa and Kent, as I mentioned before." But he hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "It seems the incident has reached some of our key stakeholders. I've been fielding calls since last night. It's not the kind of attention we want." Anya leaned back in her chair, her gaze steady. "Are you here to ask me to clean up your mess?" The manager's face flushed. No, of course not. I thought you should know. This incident has highlighted some gaps in our training and procedures, and we're committed to addressing them. I'd like to invite you to be part of that process." Anya studied him for a long moment. "You want me to help you fix your company's systemic issues? Interesting. Tell me, manager, how many of your staff members look like me?" The question caught him off guard. "Two don't have that data on hand." Anya's lips curved into a faint smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Then perhaps that's where you should start. Because until you diversify your team, your training will only scratch the surface." The manager nodded quickly. "You're absolutely right, Miss Stone. We've already started reviewing our hiring practices. And, if you're willing, we'd like to bring you on as a consultant to guide us through this process." Anya's expression didn't change, but her mind worked quickly. The offer was tempting, not because she needed the position, but because it was an opportunity to effect real change. But she wasn't about to make it easy for them. "I'll consider it," she said finally, "but only if I see a genuine commitment from your team. Words are easy, action is harder." The manager exhaled in relief. "Thank you, Miss Stone. I promise you won't be disappointed." As Anya left the meeting, her steps were slower, more deliberate. The weight of the encounter lingered, but it was a different kind of heaviness. This was progress, small perhaps, but progress nonetheless. When she stepped outside, the morning sun greeted her warmly, cutting through the chill of the air. She paused for a moment, taking in the sight of the bustling terminal. It was a reminder of how far she'd come, and how much further she still had to go. Anya's phone buzzed again. It was Emily, with an update. "Emily, I checked the news. No mention of the incident yet, but I heard through a contact that Lisa and Ken have both been reassigned. Seems like they're feeling the pressure." Anya allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Change wasn't immediate, but it was beginning to ripple outward. Anya sat at her desk in the spacious corner office of her downtown headquarters. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden streaks across the sleek furniture. She stared at the document on her screen, a proposal draft for expanding her mentorship program, but her mind wandered to the meeting at the terminal. The echoes of Lisa and Kent's voices, their justifications, and their eventual apologies still lingered in her thoughts. Her phone buzzed softly, pulling her attention away. It was Emily, her assistant. "Miss Stone," Emily said, her voice tinged with curiosity. "There's a call for you. It's Lisa, from the terminal. She says it's personal and insists on speaking with you." Anya's eyebrows lifted slightly. Lisa of all people? For a moment, she considered declining the call, but something, perhaps curiosity or a sense of closure, made her nod. "Put her through," Anya said. The line clicked, and Lisa's hesitant voice filled the room. "Miss Stone?" It's Lisa, from the terminal. "I hope I'm not intruding." Anya's tone was neutral but polite. "What can I do for you, Lisa?" There was a pause on the other end before Lisa spoke again, her voice shaky but sincere. "I just wanted to say thank you for what you said to me yesterday. You didn't have to, but that IT made me think. A lot." Anya leaned back in her chair, her curiosity piqued. "Go on," Lisa continued, her words tumbling out as though she'd been rehearsing them. "I've been in this job for years, and I guess I thought I was good at it. But yesterday that you made me realize how blind I've been, how many people I've probably treated unfairly without even realizing it." Her voice cracked slightly. "I can't change what I did to you, Miss Stone, but I want you to know, I'm going to change how I approach my job. I'm going to do better. And I owe that to you." Anya let Lisa's words hang in the air for a moment, weighing their sincerity. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm. "Lisa, it's not me you owe," she said. "It's every person you dismissed, every assumption you made without question. Words are a start, but they're not enough. What matters is what you do next." "I know," Lisa said quickly. "I've already started. I've been reading, watching talks, trying to educate myself. I even talked to the manager about creating a feedback system for passengers, so people like you can hold us accountable." Anya's lips curved into a small smile. "That's a step in the right direction. But remember, Lisa, real change takes time, and it's not always easy." "I'm ready for it," Lisa said, her voice steady now. "Thank you for giving me the chance to learn from my mistakes." Anya nodded, though Lisa couldn't see it. "Good luck, Lisa." The call ended, and Anya sat quietly for a moment, reflecting. She wasn't sure if Lisa's transformation would last, but the fact that her words had sparked something was enough for now. Her thoughts were interrupted by another buzz, this time an email from the terminal manager. The subject line read, "Proposal for Partnership." Anya opened the message and skimmed through the carefully worded text. The terminal manager was inviting her to collaborate on a diversity initiative aimed at transforming not just the terminal, but the broader aviation industry. He wanted her to help design a comprehensive training program, recruit diverse staff, and create a model for inclusive service. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she considered the offer. It was tempting, not because she needed the validation, but because it was a chance to make a lasting impact. "Anya, let's schedule a meeting to discuss next steps." Later that evening, as Anya sat on her balcony overlooking the city, she thought about how far she had come. The skyline glittered before her, a mosaic of opportunity and ambition. Her journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. The terminal incident was just one of many battles she had fought, but it had sparked something larger, something that might ripple outward in ways she couldn't yet see. Anya took a sip of her wine and leaned back in her chair, a quiet determination settling over her. The work was far from over, but she was ready for it. Because Anya Stone didn't just rise above the storm. She turned it into a force for change. The conference room buzzed with a quiet energy as a group of executives, trainers, and managers gathered around the long oak table. Screens flickered with presentations, and a collection of neatly arranged folders sat at each seat, bearing the title, The Future of Inclusive Aviation, a strategic partnership with Anya Stone. Anya stood at the head of the table, her tailored navy blue suit a stark contrast to the casual unease of the attendees. Her presence was commanding yet approachable, her calm gaze sweeping over the room as she prepared to speak. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of planning, meetings, and strategy, all leading up to this pivotal moment. "Good morning," Anya began, her voice steady and confident. "Thank you all for being here today. What we're about to discuss isn't just a program. It's a movement, a commitment to changing the way we think, operate, and serve." She clicked a small remote, and the screen behind her lit up with images of diverse travelers, families, business people, solo adventurers, all smiling as they navigated airports. The tagline read, "Every passenger matters." "This initiative isn't about checking boxes or meeting quotas," Anya continued. "It's about redefining the passenger experience. It's about creating a culture where respect, dignity, and inclusion are not just ideals, but standards." She paused, letting her words sink in. Around the table, heads nodded, and pens scratched across notepads. Even the terminal manager, who had initially approached Anya with hesitation, now seemed fully invested in her vision. As Anya moved through the presentation, she shared moments from her own journey, not just the incident at the terminal, but other experiences that had shaped her understanding of resilience and justice. "I remember being told, 'You don't look like a CEO,'" she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "And I also remember the moment I decided those words would never define me. What I've learned is that how we treat people in those defining moments matters. It can change the trajectory of someone's life or crush it." Lisa, seated at the far end of the table, listened intently, her face a mixture of guilt and determination. She had insisted on attending this meeting, not as an employee, but as someone eager to learn. Her notebook was already filled with notes, her pen poised to capture every word Anya spoke. When Anya concluded her presentation, she opened the floor for questions. A middle-aged executive raised his hand, his expression thoughtful. "Miss Stone, these ideas are inspiring, but how do we ensure they stick? How do we make this more than just a temporary fix?" Anya nodded, appreciating the honesty of the question. "It starts with leadership," she said. "Change has to come from the top. Policies, training, and initiatives are critical, but they're meaningless without accountability. That's why I propose creating an ongoing oversight committee, composed of employees, passengers, and external advocates, to monitor progress and address issues in real time." The room murmured in agreement, and the terminal manager made a note on his tablet. Another attendee, a younger woman, spoke up. "What about the hiring process? How do we attract and retain diverse talent in an industry that's historically lacked representation?" Anya's eyes lit up. "Great question," she said. "It starts with outreach, partnering with organizations that support underrepresented groups, offering scholarships for aviation training, and creating mentorship programs within your company. And once you have that talent, you have to nurture it. Ensure that they have opportunities to grow and lead." Toward the end of the session, Lisa hesitated before raising her hand. Her voice was soft, but steady when she spoke. "Miss Stone, I wanted to say thank you. Not just for what you've done today, but for what you did that day in the lounge. You didn't have to confront me, but you did, and it changed how I see myself and my role. I promise you, I'll do better. And I hope this initiative ensures no one else has to go through what you did." The room fell silent, the weight of Lisa's words palpable. Anya regarded her for a moment, her expression softening. "Thank you, Lisa," Anya said, her voice warm. "Acknowledging our mistakes is the first step toward growth. What matters now is what you do moving forward, and I believe you can make a difference." As the meeting concluded, Anya stood by the door, shaking hands with each attendee as they left. Many thanked her, some with genuine admiration, others with nervous gratitude. But all of them left with a new perspective and a plan for action. Lisa lingered at the door, her notebook clutched tightly. "Miss Stone," she said softly, "if you ever need help with the initiative, I'd be honored to volunteer." Anya smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression. "I'll hold you to that, Lisa." Later that evening, Anya found herself back at the terminal, waiting to board another flight. This time, the staff greeted her with respect, their smiles genuine. As she walked through the lounge, she noticed subtle changes. More diverse faces among the employees, passengers being treated with care and dignity. It wasn't perfect, change never was. But it was a start. When Anya boarded the Kestrel 8641, she glanced out the window at the terminal, its lights twinkling in the night. She felt a sense of satisfaction, not just for the battle she had won, but for the path she had carved for others to follow. As the jet ascended into the sky, Anya leaned back in her seat, her heart light. She wasn't just flying above the clouds. She was soaring above the storms of prejudice and doubt. And as far as she was concerned, the journey was only just beginning. This story reminds us that true strength lies in standing firm, even when others doubt your worth. Anya didn't just prove her place. She turned a moment of discrimination into a movement for change, inspiring others to challenge injustice and demand respect. If this story resonated with you, let us know in the comments and share it with someone who might need a little inspiration today. Before you leave, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this to life. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.